At 3:14 local time, deep in the freezing fog of the Lincoln Sea, the Arctic ice suddenly cracks open. A Russian Yasen M submarine rises through the frozen surface just 45 meters from Greenland's coast. Its launch tubes hum with readiness, aimed toward the Atlantic. On the icy shoreline, elite Russian special forces rush from rigid hull boats, their boots hitting sovereign ground as they move to plant a flag, convinced the world is too distracted to notice. They believe they are moving like shadows through a blind spot in America's vision, while Washington is focused elsewhere. But as the Russian commander prepares to report a triumph back to Moscow, he has no idea the air around him is already alive with the invisible electronic signature of an American stealth network. Beneath the ice and across silent upper atmosphere frequencies, events are already unfolding in ways Kremlin sensors have not detected. Stay with this story until the end, because the way this secret landing unravels involves a precise invisible counter, vanishing Russian assets, and a setback Moscow still struggles to explain. The final moments reveal the real cost of this miscalculation. The global picture had already changed dramatically in the weeks after a major American operation removed a growing threat in Venezuela. That move sent a strong signal through the Kremlin, especially as Washington made clear it was once again deeply committed to securing the GIUK gap, the vital naval corridor between Greenland, Iceland, and the United Kingdom. There was even growing discussion of a permanent military presence on Greenland to reinforce NATO's northern defenses. From Moscow's point of view, its leverage in the high north was slipping away fast. This was never meant to be a routine patrol. It was a bold covert landing designed to create a fait accompli on the ground, a permanent Russian foothold on Greenlandic soil that could trigger a diplomatic crisis, with Moscow holding the initiative. The goal was simple: prove to the world that Russia could still project power into the Atlantic's core. What the Kremlin failed to grasp was that the U.S. Navy and Air Force do not merely operate in the Arctic. After decades of Cold War experience, they understand this environment down to its harshest details. The Russian force, led by Admiral Kasatonov, was acting under a doctrine of active defense, Moscow's familiar phrase for aggressive expansion wrapped in the language of security. They deployed some of their top units, including the 45th Separate Special Purpose Brigade of the VDV and Northern Fleet teams trained for extreme cold sabotage and rapid airfield seizure. Their confidence rested on a dangerous assumption that the United States would respond too slowly or too cautiously to challenge a gray zone move that stopped short of formal war. They relied on the Krasnoyarsk, one of Russia's quietest nuclear-powered cruise missile submarines, to shield the operation from below the ice. Russian planners believed its sonar would detect any American presence long before it became a serious threat. Their plan was to land, dig in, establish a long-range S-400 defensive perimeter, and then announce their presence to the world, creating a new strategic reality overnight. They counted on Washington being tied down by commitments in South America and the Middle East. It was a gamble of enormous scale, built on the outdated belief that Arctic storms could blind American satellite coverage and that distance from the continental United States would slow any meaningful reaction. Moscow expected days of diplomatic maneuvering. What they got instead was a crushing answer within the hour. Russian command also suffered from serious overconfidence. They believed their Polyak electronic warfare systems could blur their signature from Western surveillance. They advanced with the swagger of a force that had not faced a true peer-level technological response in years. The Russian Ministry of Defense assumed that because America was integrating new systems in the Caribbean, the GIUK gap would be left thinly defended. What they overlooked was this: the U.S. Navy does not simply leave a theater, it automates it. Sonar arrays lining the seabed, part of the upgraded SOSUS network, were already feeding the Krasnoyarsk's acoustic signature to analysts in Virginia. Every cavitation pattern from its 7-bladed propeller was being recorded, studied, and turned into targeting data. The danger level was not merely high, it was decisive. Moscow wanted a buffer zone, but its strategy rested on a profound misunderstanding of American logistics, sensor fusion, and speed. They believed they held the advantage, when in reality, they were moving directly into a trap. The American response was led by the USS Gerald R. Ford Carrier Strike Group, which had been operating quietly in the North Atlantic under strict emissions control, making the 100,000-ton carrier nearly invisible to Russian electronic monitoring. At the core of the U.S. counter was the Aegis combat system aboard Arleigh Burke-class destroyers, especially the USS Donald Cook, whose AN/SPY-6 radar could track Russian frigates through dense Arctic fog and snow. Its sensitivity was extraordinary, capable of detecting even very small objects at immense range, let alone full-sized warships. While Russian crews struggled with ice building up on older, less effective sensor systems, the U.S. Navy used P-8A Poseidon aircraft to deploy a smart web of multi-static sonar buoys around the Russian Yasen submarine. Each buoy became part of a digital chain, turning the undersea battlespace into something close to a transparent bowl. America was not just preparing to stop the move, it was setting the stage for a demonstration no one in Moscow would forget. A flight of F-35C Lightning IIs was also launched, among the most advanced sensor platforms ever fielded. Using their multifunction advanced data link, they helped coordinate a simulated strike package the Russians would not fully recognize until the virtual weapons were only 45 seconds from impact. Each F-35C functioned like a command node in the sky, fusing information from satellites, underwater sensors, and land-based systems into one seamless tactical picture. This was not a balanced contest. It was a fully integrated multi-domain trap, where every Russian move was answered by a computer-generated solution before their commanders could even react. The American preparation was absolute. The USS Donald Cook was not operating alone. It had the weight of the Ford's air wing behind it, including EA-18G Growlers tuned specifically to disrupt the frequencies used by Russian S-400 radar systems. The Navy also had Tomahawk Block 5 missiles available, weapons capable of changing targets mid-flight and distinguishing between military ships and civilian vessels, even in heavy clutter. Inside the Combat Information Center, every sailor was a specialist trained to handle extreme pressure with calm precision. There was no confusion, no panic, only execution of an Arctic denial protocol rehearsed countless times in digital simulations. Russia had arrived with a playbook from another era. The United States answered with next-generation capability. By 3:52, the confrontation reached its peak. It began not with a loud blast, but with a silent, overwhelming display of technological dominance that froze the Russian force in place. As Russian special operators prepared to raise their flag on a ridge overlooking the landing zone, the sky suddenly lit up as if dawn had arrived early. Two U.S. Air Force B-21 Raiders, operating in their first real-world high-stakes mission, released long-range anti-ship missiles. These LRASMs were not programmed to strike the Russian vessels directly. Instead, they executed high-speed, low-altitude passes just 50 feet above the frigate's masts. The shockwaves shattered glass on the bridges and sent sailors diving for cover. At the same time, the USS Donald Cook closed the distance at speed, its Mark 45 5-inch naval gun slewing with robotic accuracy toward Admiral Kasatonov's ship, while its electronic warfare system flooded Russian communications with digital noise. Radar screens filled with nonsense. Encrypted radios carried only one clear message, a calm American voice stating, "Russian vessels, you are in direct violation of sovereign airspace and territorial waters. You have 300 seconds to commence immediate withdrawal or you will be neutralized." The pressure inside the Russian combat centers was overwhelming. Officers realized they were under targeting lock from at least a dozen platforms they could not even locate. Beneath the surface, the Yasen M submarine tried to reposition for a torpedo response, only to be hit with a massive active sonar ping from the USS Vermont, a Virginia-class submarine that had reportedly been sitting in the Russian boat's blind zone for 4 hours. It was the underwater equivalent of a weapon held at point-blank range. Captain second-rank Ivanov looked at his blank displays and understood the reality instantly. His submarine had become a trap. He had been given 5 minutes to decide between retreat and complete loss. Every second on the American countdown brought his force closer to a full missile response. On shore, the Russian Special Forces, hearing the B-21's thunder overhead, knew they were isolated, exposed, and badly outmatched. They were pinned between the frozen sea and the most powerful military on Earth. What followed was a case study in disciplined de-escalation, one that privately shook the Russian military establishment. Once it became clear that every link in their strike chain had been broken, and that even their most advanced submarine was being handled with ease, Russian High Command in Severomorsk sent an urgent coded order for immediate full withdrawal. The Special Forces teams that had arrived so confidently rushed back to their landing craft in near panic, abandoning expensive cold weather gear, crates of ammunition, and even a tactical drone controller in their haste to escape the invisible wall of American force closing around them. During the retreat, the Russian frigates reportedly attempted to fire 2 defensive caliber missiles to cover their exit and preserve some dignity. Neither performed as intended. One suffered a catastrophic booster failure in the brutal cold, reportedly worsened by poor build quality. The other was immediately deceived by electronic countermeasures from the USS Donald Cook and crashed harmlessly into the ice. These are the kinds of losses the Kremlin has never wanted to discuss openly, because they raise uncomfortable questions about the gap between public messaging and battlefield reality. The humiliation was complete. The Russian group withdrew toward the Kola Peninsula, followed all the way to the edge of its own waters by the steady presence of American sonar. In the days that followed, satellite images reportedly showed a heavy atmosphere at Northern Fleet headquarters. The cost of the operation was not just reputational, it also involved lost munitions, abandoned equipment, and a serious psychological blow to elite Russian units. The U.S. Navy observed the retreat the entire way, maintaining a perfect fire control picture until the final Russian wake disappeared beyond the horizon. There were no victory parades, no loud media spectacles, only the quiet professionalism of crews who had executed their mission with chilling precision. The Arctic returned to silence, but the record of failed Russian ambition beneath those frozen waters had grown deeper. America's presence in the region was no longer a matter of debate. It stood as a silent warning that the age of easy gray zone land grabs in the far north was over. This encounter offers a cold lesson about modern power. In the 2020s, strength is not measured only by fleet size or rhetoric. It is measured by the speed of information, the quality of training, and the ability to integrate every sensor and platform into one decisive response. Russia tried to play a 20th century game of territorial pressure in a 21st century world shaped by total surveillance and instant coordination. What it discovered is that the Arctic is not an unguarded frontier. It is a tightly watched domain defended by those who have mastered technology, logistics, and discipline. The American response was not luck, and it was not improvisation. It was the product of decades of preparation, enormous investment, and a clear refusal to be intimidated by covert pressure tactics. As tensions continue to rise around the world and rival powers test the limits of what they think they can get away with, one truth remains. Stability is not preserved by empty statements alone, but by visible capability and the readiness to act anywhere, under any conditions. For Moscow, the message could not be clearer. If you challenge the masters of the sea in their own strategic backyard, be ready for a long, bitter, and deeply uncomfortable retreat. Greenland's strategic value is now beyond dispute, and the message to the world is equally direct. The United States will not hesitate when a red line is crossed, no matter the region or the timing. The lesson is simple. Never mistake American restraint for weakness, because the moment that boundary is tested, the answer can come with breathtaking speed and finality. Stay sharp, stay informed, and remember,